Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great pleasure and privilege to welcome you all to the workshop on writing for top-tier journals, how to impress editors and increase your chance. Proudly presented by the 9th World Conference on Media and Mass Communication 2024. We know that most of you are very keen on knowing more about research and specifically publication, where you bring the impact of your work to the world. The main objective of this workshop is to cater your publication needs, and this will be initiative of many more knowledge sharing opportunities. The workshop speaker for today will be Associate Professor Piotr Suda. Before we move forward in the agenda, I would like to share the program for today's workshop. First, we will have the workshop led by Professor Piotr Suda. Then there will be a Q&A session related to the workshop. And finally, you will have a brief overview about the MedCom 2024 conference. So to introduce the workshop speaker, Associate Professor Piotr Suda. He is an associate professor at the Faculty of Cultural Studies at the Kazimierz Wielki University in Poland. He is a member of the Association of Internet Researchers and Digital Game Research Association. His research interests include internet studies, media studies, game studies, and e-sport, among others. He has been published in reputable journals, including the Journal of Computer Mediated Communication, Game and Culture, the International Journal of Cultural Studies, and Leisure Studies. Additionally, he is an associate editor of Sage Journal of Creative Communication. So today, Professor Suda will conduct a workshop on publication under the title of Writing for Top-Tier Journals, How to Impress Editors and Increase Your Chance. So ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to invite Professor Piotr Suda to conduct this session. Professor, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this great invitation. And it's a great pleasure to be able to conduct this workshop today to speak to all of you. We have 55 people joining our workshop. I think that there are more coming. But nevertheless, I will start, of course, and thank you for this great invitation. And yeah, I'm from Poland. It's extremely hard to pronounce if you are not as Polish native speaker. Kazimierz Wielki University in Bydgoszcz, Poland. So I represent the Faculty of Cultural Studies, and as you have mentioned, I have many interests, many research interests, but my experience mostly about writing papers, of course, is also stems from publishing the papers in reputable journals, but also I'm also an associate editor of Journal of Creative Communications, as was said before. And I will give you some information on publishing in reputable journals based on this as well. Of course, I think that it's extremely hard to just talk how to prepare oneself, how to publish in reputable journals, in top-tier journals, just within 1 hour, because this is a 1-hour workshop. So I will just I think that I will just mention some issues that are, I think that they are worth considering, and I think that you should try to gain some more information on these issues. So I will just introduce some issues. I think that the first thing is that you have to remember is to prepare yourself accordingly. If you want to impress the editor and increase your chances when publishing papers, I think it's extremely important to prepare oneself. And by preparing oneself or yourself, I mean planning your writing. Also, using proper style, choosing the right venue, the right journal is also extremely important. And I will just introduce these points in a second, because planning is about the category of one papers, choosing the paper's type, and all these other issues. So using proper style, if you are not a native English speaker, this is extremely important because I'm not an English guy. I'm not American. I'm not British, Australian, and so on. I'm not native English speaker. So it was extremely hard for me to present my research properly. So I don't know if you are native English speakers. So I don't have this knowledge. I don't know who you are. But in case you are not, I think you may find this useful. Also, choosing the right venue, the right journals, lots of factors influence this, and I will mention them in a second. When planning your writing, when preparing oneself, first thing is, I think that the first thing that is very important, and this issue is mentioned in lots of academic writing publications like books and articles and so on, and you have to decide on the category of your paper. And it's not about the problem, the hypothesis, research questions. It's not that, because of course research questions and hypotheses, these all are in the paper. But when preparing, when planning, you have to just ask yourself what this paper is about, so to decide the category. And I have three categories here on the slide. So number one, my research shows which theory is true or at least closer to the truth. Number two, this is how it works. Liver cell process, social or cultural phenomena, cloud formation, etc., etc. Number three, what seems similar is actually different, or vice versa. Example, a dolphin is not a fish. So basically, it's about deciding the main frame here. And of course, this is these three categories I have just read are very, very broad. You have to imagine the appropriate categories for your own field of study, I think, because of course, when I'm into game studies, for example, or communication studies, or media studies, I would probably decide on several categories that I could introduce. But it's only like this, cognitive, how to stimulate your brain to do the proper writing, to decide the category and what is this final message, the take-home message you want to just present. But this is obvious, and I think that when coming to some details is choosing the type of your paper. Because of course, when you think about the research paper, you imagine this as a research article, like you are doing an important research. You are asking some research questions, presenting, maybe doing some experiments and so on. So you present this as an empirical study, as a research article. Of course, this is like the obvious type of the academic paper. Of course, there are lots of other types of papers, like, for example, literature reviews, brief commentaries, case studies, and the journals inform about these types of papers on their websites. And basically, you can find these types when you read the author guidelines. But be sure to read these guidelines perfectly in details, because some of the journals may want some particular types of papers. And I could give you many examples. For example, the journal I am an associate editor of, the Journal of Creative Communications, has this very basic division on research article, literature review, brief commentary, and case studies, just like on the slides. But for example, when you take Research and Politics, this is a journal also published by Sage. If you will look at the website, you will find that they have lots of interesting types. So they have this research article, which is kind of the standard research paper, and the journal encourages short articles. This is how they propose it. Only 4,000 words article should normally not exceed 4,000 words. But when you skip this research articles information, you see that they also want research notes, and these should focus on controversy in the literature, presenting a new empirical finding, or discuss the policy implications of recently gained insight, and so on. And the third type they want is replication studies. So in case of replication studies, research and politics invites authors to consider submitting a paper that is along the lines of one or more of the following replication types: theoretical replication, technical replication, and concept replication. And you can read what these are about on the website. So it's basically about impressing the editor that you have chosen the right type of paper for the research you are presenting for, because of course the editors will not waste time if they see that this is not the type of the article they are using in their journals. So I think that it's extremely important to familiarize yourself with the types, and of course choosing the right type is one of the points of preparing oneself. But also using proper style, and I mean here mainly language, but not only, because lots of scientific writing, and I mean here not only social sciences. I'm into social sciences, media studies, communication studies, but when you look at academic writing publications, books, and so on, you see that the authors suggest not taking like the style of an academic writer, the role of an academic writer is a mistake. And by taking on the role of an academic writer, I mean here many things. Like, for example, unnecessary complicating your paper. I think that this is often a way to hide the mediocrity of one's work, because if the paper is complicated, for example, when you're considering structure, you are repeating yourself, presenting different parts of the structure in different parts of the paper. This is complicated. Also, complicated in paper is, I mean here the language. If you are introducing a very hard language, and do not get me wrong here, I am talking about a very I am talking about science, so this is like complicated stuff. So this is, terminology. This is sometimes very complex themes, complex research questions, and so on. This is obvious, but I mean, when we are talking about the language, you have to present it comprehensively. For example, if you take Nature, this is a journal that is very specific. It's the highest ranked journal in the world, but the language is quite easy there. And of course, you have many specialized journals. They use harder language than Nature, but the main trend, the main idea is that today you should try to write as to present your research comprehensively, use the lighter language, do not complicate. Not complicating the language is also very, it's a good idea. Also, this using proper style is just guiding the reader, the editor, the reviewers from one topic to another and explaining everything clearly. I think that it's not wise to leave anything to guess. You can use literature. You can reference. You can use references to guide readers, but it's about being very precise, and it's better to be precise and not wordy. If you know what I mean by being wordy in English, this is something you could try. Of course, do not oversimplify, but explain complex issues clearly. So this is sometimes really hard stuff, but it's very clear. And the main idea is that you should write so the reader never returns to what she has already read, because of course the reviewers, the editors, and of course your potential readers are very busy persons. So they don't have time, especially if you are an editor of a top-tier journal, Q1, Q2 journal. You have lots of papers coming in. So you're doing this very fast. So you don't, if something is so complicated, you do not want to do this. So it's basically a good idea to be to use the style I'm proposing. And this is also about the language, of course. And this is one of the reviews I have received when I published in Journal of Computer Mediated Communication. This is a Q1 journal with impact factor 7.4. I think this is one of the highest ranked journal in communication studies actually at the moment. And this was a paper I co-authored with native English speakers. So this was a guy who who checked the language, and nevertheless, one of the reviewers, there were 3 rounds of reviews. One of the reviewers, there were three reviewers there, and one of them stated, this is of course only a short, very, very short part of this review. One of the remark was, the article often uses phrasing that is abstract, obfuscated, or unclear. The whole article needs to be examined for clarity of wording. The writing style is often long and meandering. And although I believe that I have already learned this, how to use proper English, this was like also, I think that there are lots of reasons why this remark was there. But nevertheless, this still surprised me. And it was a proof that, yeah, you should write this in an easier way. But what does this actually mean? Well, for me, I'm a Polish English. I'm a Polish native speaker. So I'm guessing that there aren't many Poles here, if there are at all today. But if there are, and if you're not, I will just inform you, the Polish language is really, really specific when it comes to this richness. Polish language has lots of adjectives, lots of very, very complicated sentences, where there are very, very long sentences. So my natural predisposition when writing in English is to, to copy this style, Polish style, and just use it when I'm writing in English. But for me, it's not a good idea, because this is really awkward language, and this is the language the reviewer here noticed. Phrasing that is abstract, obfuscated, unclear, and so on. So he wanted it to be more clear. So yeah, this is the idea. So I have used some examples here. You can see the incorrect style on the left and the correct style on the right. So for example, the structures were placed in a vacuum chamber with 4 optical ports, permitting to measure the spectral characteristic of the transmission of light. This is physics. And maybe it's too complicated. Maybe it's simpler to write to measure the spectral characteristic of the transmitted light. The structures were placed, mounted in a vacuum chamber with 4 ports. And I'm using this from the Polish language, because the left side is just like I would say it in Polish and just translate it. The obtained results indicate the possibility of applying titanium dioxide layers in these coatings. Maybe it's better to write these, or the results indicate, or our results indicate, or results from this study indicate, and so on. I love this example because this is the example how wordy Polish language tends to be. And you should avoid being that wordy when you write your research papers. So I could write it. In my assessment of this issue, I have followed the advice formulated by Stormy King. This researcher proposed that the degree of research subjects' privacy infringement online be assessed by, and so on. So this long sentence, which is perfectly fine in Polish, would be really awkward in English. So I think that the more appropriate way to write this is, I assess this issue following Stormy King, who proposed. And the final example here, I don't want to, no, it's not the final, sorry. It's almost, two more to go. So for example, incorrect one, the sample of the blocks was not a representative one. So it's when you are talking about sampling something. In Polish, this is like an exact translation, the sample of the blocks. But of course, in English, it's not good, it's incorrect. The blocks sampled were not representative. And the last one, which is a perfect example when I'm talking about Polish language, that this very, very complicated sentence on the left, it's perfectly fine in Polish. The main aim of this article is concentrating on factors that are connected with problems of overpopulation and aging in highly developed countries. This tends to be long. This tends to be complicated. I think it's more lighter to write it like this. The article concentrates on factors related to overpopulation and aging in highly developed countries. And of course, it's extremely hard for me to explain this properly, because I could give you more examples and we could discuss the language nuances, right? Depending on whether you are native English speakers or not, and what is your native language and so on. But the main idea here is that this paper should be light, comprehensive, clear, transparent, and so on. This is the good way to write research paper. Of course, choosing the right journal is also very important when it comes to impressing the editor, because when the editor will see that the scope of the paper does not fit the scope of the journal, this will be immediately rejected. Or at least you will have bad luck if the editor will somehow allow for the reviews, and then the reviewers will reject the paper based on the scope of the paper. You will lose several months, and you could have easily proposed this paper elsewhere, right? So I think that it's extremely important to just choose the right journal, to understand what is the journal's focus. And I think that it's, of course, about our competences. We read papers, we know journals, so we know which journals are appropriate, I think, but you can use some publisher tools to try to find some appropriate journals. And each major publisher proposes this kind of tools. For example, Elsevier has this journal finder tool. And this is the tool that will allow you to find some journals. I will use my own abstract here, one of the papers, from one of the papers I have recently proposed. So I have just copy-pasted the abstract here. It's basically all the tools are about this copy-pasting or just writing abstracts and maybe keywords, titles, and so on. So I used the abstract of one of my journals, and results are immediately here. They proposed that the best journal for this paper is Computers in Human Behavior, a Q1 journal with impact factor of 9.9, an acceptance rate of 9%, and so on. So you can find other journals here. Some of the matches are quite low, but I think that so the Elsevier has this journal finder, Springer has journal suggester, Taylor and Francis have journal suggester, Sage is proposing journal recommender, and so on and so on. You can also find some interesting tool in this editage services. It's a Journal Live. It is called Researcher Live. Sorry, Researcher Live. If you are logged in here, you will find a tool that is called Journal Finder. It's also really nice, this Journal Finder. It's similar to Elsevier's Journal Finder, but these tools, this kind of tools, they are really nice, but the truth is that they will only give you some proposals. This you shouldn't really treat this as, you know, I will use this journal immediately without thinking. This is not the way. I think this is the way to find some interesting titles, some interesting journals. But you have to always consider what is the focus. So you have to visit the web page. You have to write the guidelines. You have to write the articles in this journal. So the competences. Also, of course, I think that increasing your chances is deciding whether your paper is a good fit for the journal when it comes to the metrics, because sometimes we have this feeling that this paper is really good, and I would like to, this research was really good, and I think that we know that this is somehow important and we want to present it to the Q1 journal. But sometimes I think that lots of people are just trying without thinking, and they are, you know, try to find the journal with the highest impact factor and so on. I think that you should balance here. So the metrics are important, and the editor and the reviewers, of course, will also pay attention to the quality of your work. Another important aspect here is deciding on open access. I don't know if you are if you have money for open access, or maybe you just strive for publishing in open access. Of course, this is a good idea, and it's not it basically it has nothing to do with impressing the editor. Of course, you can impress the editor in only in such a way that, of course, he will look at your work and will see your work without any barriers, right? If you want to somehow decide about this, there are also some tools that will help you gain information on what is the policy of the publisher when it comes to copyrights. The basic tool, I think, is the Sherpa Romeo. You just use this service. For example, I will use Games and Culture Journal. This is also a Sage journal, and this is full information about what you have, what is the open access policy. So you have to pay for open access, and what you can do with the accepted version or submitted version. So the preprint or author, the preprint is of course the version that the author retains copyrights. So you can, for example, publish on your website this version. So this is something to be something to use if you want to just quickly find out about the policy of the journal when it comes to the copyrights. There is also directory of open access journals here. If you want to find out nice open access journals that are not predatory publishers, that are not predatory journals, directory of open access journals is a good way to do this. So, of course, watch out for predators, for predatory publishing, for predatory journals. Watch out for questionable journals. You can use lots of lists, for example, Bales lists, for example, predatory publishing lists. Bales list is, of course, redundant because somehow redundant because it hasn't been updated since 2016. But nevertheless, you can still use it to try to determine whether the publisher is a predatory publisher. So, of course, COPE is like the Committee of Publication Ethics. If the journal is the member of the COPE, it's good. You can be more safe. Watch out, nevertheless, watch out, because lots of questionable journals are not on the list and are members of COPE. And for example, there are lots of discussion when it comes to MDPI publisher, whether this is like predatory publishing or not. And of course, the scientists are disagreeing with each other whether this is somehow questionable or not. Well, they are questionable because of the speed of the reviewing process, but whether these are predators or not, this is being discussed. And so preparing yourself is about all these issues I have mentioned. So if I would summarize what it means to prepare yourself, you have to decide all these stuff, the category, the journal, the type, and so on. But if you decide the journal you want to submit your article to, then I think it's extremely important, if you want to impress the editor and then the reviewers, to present yourself appropriately. And I mean here cover letter, following the standards, and of course also later when you receive the reviews, responding to all the comments. This is extremely important. So I will start with writing a cover letter. The cover letter is, of course, a letter to the editor. You should explain the scope of your research, the scope of your paper. And I think the most important issue is to explain that your paper is innovative and why it is innovative. So, of course, because originality, innovativeness, newness of the paper is something that is particularly important for the editors. The cover letter is also a good way to explain all rule breaking. So if you are, for example, exceeding the number of words that is allowed, you can explain the editor why this is taking place and ask him to nevertheless to include this paper in the process. Following the standards is preparing a clear and precise abstract, proper title, and crucial keywords, and I will delve into this in a moment. And responding to the comments is mainly about being very precise and very informative, and I will also mention this in a moment. But first, I have this example of cover letter. I've mentioned what is cover letter and how to properly present cover letter. So I have this example of a cover letter. I don't want to read it. I don't want to read it the whole letter, but I will just give you some idea how you could structure your cover letter. So first of all, you should explain who you are and what you do. So this is like this cover letter. Dear editor, please find attached the manuscript entitled Light-Driven Soft Robot Mimics Caterpillar Locomotion in Natural Scale that we would like to submit for publication in Nature Communication as an article. And the findings presented are the results of collaboration between the group and so on. So who they are and what they have done. Then there is explaining the aims, challenges, problems, and research questions. So I won't read it maybe because this is physics, but basically the rule is always the same, that explaining the aim, challenges, problems, research questions, so explaining what has been done and how. And this third point, explain what is new and innovative. So they have stated in this manuscript, we show that with proper molecular alignment, engineering in a 50mm long stripe made of liquid crystalline elastomer, we can mimic a caterpillar traveling wave of locomotion and demonstrate different walking strategies under laser light illumination and so on. And then there is this, what is new and innovative in this research. And the final, and this is something I haven't mentioned before, this is the cover letter, which has this final element of suggesting potential reviewers. This is the last paragraph here. So after this, and this asking the editor to include this for publication, they have stated, we would like to suggest the following expert scientists for the evaluation of this work. And if you have ever submitted a paper to a journal, you know that some journals may have this requirement of suggesting the expert scientists for evaluating the work, for evaluating the papers. So suggesting reviewers. However, not all of the journals introduce this. I will use an example of Cyber Psychology, Behavior, and Social Networking Journal. This is one of the top tier journals in cyber psychology. I think this is the highest ranked journal in cyber psychology. And currently I have one paper which is under review, but I will not I won't be talking about this paper. I will just start a new submission just very, very quickly, and we'll skip all this information, what type of paper this is, and so on, and I will just go to step 5, which are reviewers and editors. And this is the case I have been talking about. So suggesting the reviewers, this is not a required field in case of cyber psychology, behavior, and social networking. This is not required. You can in case of other journals, this may be required field, so you are obliged to suggest 3, 4, or maybe even 5 reviewers. But in case when this is not required, nevertheless, I would still go with this. So I would still try to put here as many names as possible. Maybe 4, maybe 5, maybe 3 if you are very, very reluctant or you don't have any ideas. Maybe 3 will just suffice. If the given journal has not introduced this field, step 5, in this panel, in this system, I think a good way to suggest some potential reviewers is a cover letter. Why this is so important? Of course, you are impressing the editor that you know the names from your field. But it's important, of course. But I think what is even more important is that the editors are very busy guys. They are very busy, and sometimes it's hard to find a reviewer because all the people they know, the names they know, just reject the appointments. So they don't have time and so on. So they struggle with finding reviewers, with for 2 or 3 reviewers. So if you suggest some following expert scientists for them, it's great for them. And even if they don't use the names you have suggested, they will be impressed. They will use these names for building their databases of potential reviewers for other papers. This is what I do. Basically, I have these files for each topic with the names of reviewers. And if some polite author will send me some names, I look these names, I can see what these people are and just add them to my databases. So I think it's really, really nice to include this. Also, as I mentioned before, following the standards. It's important to follow the standards. And I mean here, I'm not sure what is your stage of your academic career, whether you are an experienced author, researcher or not, but there are some standards everybody should follow. Basically about the title. There are lots of ideas about the title. Do not get me wrong. Lots of ideas because it depends on the discipline, on the field, on your individual approach. But there are some basic rules, very, very broad rules that the title should reflect the article's content and it should encourage reading the article. This is reflecting the article's content is quite obvious. Encouraging reading the article is more nuanced because it can be understood differently. But whatever the case, please see the titles in a given journal. Usually, the journals will not give you exact guidelines about the titles. So you should at least see the titles in a given journal, see what is the style the journal prefers, how the titles look like, and so on. When we are talking about reflecting the article's content, it's just basically being informative. This is all. Sometimes it always is one of the criteria of evaluating a paper, whether the title reflects the content. And it's just being informative. I have some examples here. The 3 titles and 2 versions of these 3 titles. So maybe we can look at these. At the top, you can see acceptance of the limitations resulting from a chronic somatic disease. Example, it should be like a dash or something. Example of people with psoriasis. So this is like a psychology probably, but this title is not that informative. I think it would be more informative if the authors would inform about the results more accurately. So psoriasis as an example, or is an example of high acceptance of the limitations resulting from a chronic somatic disease, an empirical study of psoriasis patients in Poland. The same with the second title, Theoretical Investigation of Titanium Oxide Nanoparticles with Surface Defects. Maybe it would be more appropriate to inform about these more, and that these are not just some broad theoretical investigation, but a concrete result is being given in this paper. So surface defects in titanium oxide nanoparticles strongly affect scattering in ceramic lasers. And the third title, Controversial Amendments in the Revised Code of Criminal Procedure. This is law. Maybe it's better to present a concrete result, lack of functional value of amendments on relegating court cases to the attorneys in the Revised Code of Criminal Procedure. So it's always about being more informative. So reflecting the content means informing about the result, maybe the methods, maybe a research question, and so on. And about the title, encouraging reading the article. Well, this is more complicated, I think, because I have found some, I think, maybe funny titles. Let's look at these. Guess who's not coming to dinner? Evaluating online restaurant reservations for disease surveillance, Journal of Medical Internet Research. You probably think this paper is about you, narcissists' perceptions of their personality and reputation, Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Ashes to Ashes, thermal contact burns in children caused by fires, Children and Mini Magnets, An Almost Fatal Attraction, Emergency Medicine Journal, Friends with Benefits on the Positive Consequences of Pet Ownership, Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. And you can already see what is the encouragement here. So this is this bolder statement that, for example, Friends with Benefits or Guess Who's Not Coming to Dinner. This is not informative at all. So this is this part of the title that is supposed to make the title funny, more catchy, more attention-grabbing, right? But be aware that this kind of titles are not always appropriate. You have to read the journal. You have to read the articles in the journal to decide whether these kind of titles are appropriate, because sometimes there aren't this kind of titles in the journal at all. So I think it would be a good idea not to introduce these kind of things then. If the journal, we can see that the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology is about this kind of titles, that is perfectly fine. This is one way of encouraging to read the paper, because of course, when I read Friends with Benefits, it's a catchy because we know how to understand this, but it's not about sex, it's about pets. But this is only one way to encourage the potential reader. I think it's all encouraging to read the article is also about this precise, being informative, giving this information about what is the result. This is all connected. So you would impress the editor if you would propose an informative and encouraging title. But I think even more important is the abstract, because this is the first part seen by the reviewer. If the edit and the editor, of course, is also paying a huge attention to the abstract. I myself believe that if I see a good abstract, which is well structured, informative, precise, I have this impression that maybe the paper is also that good. And if I see abstract which is obfuscated, unclear, non-informative, I suspect that the paper may be also of a lower quality. But of course, I read the whole article to decide its fate. But nevertheless, the abstract is a good way. A good abstract is a good way to impress the editor and the reviewers, of course. So this main idea is that the abstract clearly and accurately describes the content of the article. This is sometimes one of the criteria. I think it's almost always one of the criteria of evaluating a paper by the reviewers. Does the abstract clearly and accurately describe the content of the article? And well, it's complicated because, of course, I could give you only some idea about what it means to reflect the content of the article. Because, of course, some journals may have different ideas about the abstracts. For example, they use this classical IMART, Introduction, Methods, Results, Discussion, or CRRD. Or they use some other variation of IMART, right? Like we can see here on the slide, for example, introduction, results, discussion, and the methods are the final part of the paper. Or, for example, they use some other variation like results and discussions are connected but separated when it comes to different research actions. So despite this different structure, these journals may have some different idea about the abstract. So they may prefer narrative abstract, or they may use some different parts in the abstract, not introduction, methods, results, discussion, but for example, they can introduce originality, background, or so on. So this universal advice is that you should read the guidelines very, very, you should read them in details to decide how to construct, how to structure your abstract. But if the guidelines does not specify what is the strategy, the main idea is that you should reflect the content, the structure you have used. If they do not give any clues about the abstract, you should just precisely reflect the structure. So if you are using IMRAT, reflect the IMRAT. If you are writing a theoretical paper, literature review, an essay, some kind of humanities essay, there always is a structure in your paper. And use this structure when writing also the abstract. There are some very strict ideas how this should be approached. Some authors, some editors, some reviewers are very strict about this, and they say that you should just reflect the proportions from your paper. So, for example, if your abstract is structured in classical IMRAT, introduction, methods, results, discussion, and you are answering these obvious questions: introduction, what has been studied and why; methods, how did you study, how you studied this phenomena; results, what have we found out; discussion, what all this means. That you should reflect the proportions from the paper. So, for example, results are usually the longest part of the paper. So this should also be the longest part of the abstract. So you can see the table with the number of sentences for each part of the abstract. And for example, results should be between 3 to 5 sentences. And the introduction, 1 to 3 sentences. Methods, 1 to 2 sentences. This is usually the shortest part. Discussion, 1 to 3 sentences. But it depends. Of course, it depends, because methods in social sciences, usually this is the shortest part. But in medical sciences, for example, or some other disciplines, some other fields, this could be the longest part. But I'm mentioning this because to somehow discuss this, to somehow oppose maybe this, because this is a very strict approach. I think that you should be more elastic, because of course you should reflect the structure of your paper in the abstract, but nevertheless, sometimes I think it's wise to be more elastic, because, for example, despite methods being the shortest part of your paper, maybe this is part that is extremely important, so you would want to have it more emphasized in the abstract to give some idea to the editors, to the reviewer, what has been done. So, and how did you approach this methodology and so on, right? So I think being more elastic here is also a good idea. You can impress the editor by using the good keywords. Keywords are an extremely important element of your paper, because of course keywords are being indexed by various services, browsers, databases, indexes, and so on. Choosing the right keywords is just making sure maybe it's not about impressing the editor, because the editor may be impressed. Oh, what a nice keywords, right? But if the keywords are not that good, but the paper is extremely high quality, they will of course publish. But maybe it's more about reaching other people, other scientists, because of course if you use good keywords, you maximize the chances that the people that are interested in this particular topic, in this particular research, will just reach your article, will find your article. And I think that a good way to decide keywords is this thing I have come up with. I've called it the Google Scholar experiment, but it can easily use some other services, some other browsers. to verify your keywords. What I mean here is just putting your top 3 or maybe 4 or even 5 keywords into Google Scholar or some other tool and see what is the topic of the papers that come up. Because if the topic is very similar to your paper, these are good keywords. Because of course, you should always consider the combining keywords. I've mentioned 3 keywords because you have to imagine what the people will be putting in the Google Scholar, right? What keywords they will use to find some papers. So this is about right combination of keywords. And this is also about this balancing between too broad and too general keywords. Because if you use a discipline like social sciences as your keyword, this will be too broad. Because of course, this will not, your paper will be lost in all of these papers from social sciences. And if you are too precise about your keywords, you will, of course, no one will be so into this topic that no one will look for this particular theme. I have an example here from my own writing. I can use it maybe. It's from the oh, I've lost the link, but it's not a problem. I will just use Sage Journal here, and yeah, this is one of my papers, and I want to show this paper to you and the keywords to illustrate the mistakes I have made. So this is the first one. This was the first ever academic paper from indexed in Web of Science that I have, in a journal indexed in the Web of Science that I have published. So I was so excited that I finally published in this reputable journal that I forgot about the keywords. Nobody really informed me about how to construct, how to phrase good keywords. And yeah, this paper has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 keywords. And out of these 5 keywords, only 1 I would agree that it's fine, but other are too precise, because nobody will look, nobody will put this phrase, pop culture in communist Poland, as a keyword in a browser or in a Sage Journal service to search for articles. Only 1 paper is used to tag this. Only 1 keyword, only 1 paper is tagged by this keyword, and this is the paper I have authored. So these are too broad, too specific, too precise keywords. And I think you know what I mean, and you have and some experience yourself. Of course, be aware that the editors will, and the reviewers, it's obvious, but the editors, of course, deciding the fate of your paper, whether to reject the paper or not. Of course, they will assess the overall quality of your paper. And I'm not delving into this because it's always hard part for me to talk about this, because of course I don't know your research agenda. I do not know what you study. What is your discipline? What is your research field? So I am unable to give you any particular advice on this. So I may only present as general points. And the idea is that the editors will, of course, assess the structure, whether this is in line with the guidelines and some standards. They will, and this is very important, judge innovativeness and contributions. They will look at tables and figures and decide whether these are fine or not. They will decide whether references are full and up to date and so on. And I think that I may try to give you maybe some hints from my own experience. One of these hints is that use RMID approach. What does this mean? Well, if you are writing a paper and it's structured on this classical IMRAD, so introduction, methods, results, and discussion, this is the way to do it. But when you are writing a paper, switch the order. So use RMID. So results, methods, introduction, discussion. So firstly, write results, then methods, then introduction, then discussion, and then, of course, order these parts as they should be in the paper. Why? Because results are the most important, not the most important, but these are like they rule the paper. You mustn't introduce anything that would compromise the results. So everything is in accordance with the results you presented. Methods is just how have you achieved the results. Introduction and discussion, you know these parts, introducing the broad field, and of course informing about the research questions and so on, and discussing the paper, the implications. What does this all mean? What are the take-home messages? What is the relevance for this broader field of research, and so on? And when we look at some other things, maybe I would just tell about the results that scientific writing specialists advise that the results should be like a good story, a story leading to several take-home messages. And you have to always decide whether all the details are really, really necessary for these take-home messages. So it's always about choosing what to include and what is just redundant, unnecessary. You must focus on these important results that are only important for your story, for these take-home messages. And of course, you can use figures, tables, but be sure to avoid common mistakes. And there are lots of common mistakes when it comes to tables and figures. For example, captions should be very informative. When it comes to this story you are telling, what is the meaning of the table and figure? What is the relevance of the table and figure for this story? You should inform about this in the caption. Also, of course, the tables and figures tend to be very chaotic, messy. This should be very precise, transparent, readable. Some people, some researchers also repeat what has been presented in the figure and present this data in main text. This is also a mistake, very common mistake. Some people, some researchers use a wrong type of figure for given data. So, for example, round versus these charts and so on. You should always decide whether the figure is appropriate for a given data. About methods, it's of course being as informative as possible. So giving all the details, the basic idea is that you should be able to repeat what other researchers have done. So if some other researchers would try to replicate the study, they should be able to do this based on what has been presented in the methods. This is sometimes very hard for us to be so precise to present all the details. And when it comes to introduction, this basic idea, this typical introduction is this funnel approach. So starting from the broad general description of your research field, but of course taking up the theme you are struggling with, and then moving on to detailed information about what is missing in research, what is missing in this, what is the niche you are filling, what is your research question, and so on. And discussion is, of course, like discussing the results, right? So this typical discussion is just interpreting, comparing to other research, indicating limitations of your research, discuss it in various ways. So be attentive to various ways of writing this part, because there are lots of possibilities here, and basically it applies to all of these parts, because results, methods, introduction, discussion, we may talk about some general rules, but of course, if you read papers, you see some differences, you see different approaches. These are because people do lots of different research. So they may try to modify, and it's nothing wrong with this. It's perfectly fine, unless the paper gets messy, not clear, unstructured, the things I have said before. So I'm assuming that you are successful in impressing the editor, so you have convinced the editor that the paper should be reviewed. And in top-tier journals, Q1, maybe Q2 also, it's almost never the case that you are being published straight away. So accepted without any comments. There are always comments. And usually these are major comments, major remarks, major revision, sometimes minor revision if your paper was really impressive. So increasing your chances is also appropriately responding to comments. And the main rules here are indicate the main changes by referring to reviewers' comments separately. A good editor will always give you this information. If you are an editor of a journal, I think it's a good practice. It's a good way to also guarantee the quality of your journal, to indicate how the authors should approach responding to comments. And one of the information the editors should give you is that you should indicate all the main changes by referring to reviewers' comments separately. Sometimes you have this space in the system, you can use the panel. Sometimes you just have to write a letter, write the responses in an editor, using the editor, right? Also, you can make generalizations for minor revisions, and I will give you some examples in a second. I think that you should also be aware that the reviewing process in high-quality journals is about discussing. So a good editor is not your enemy. Like, the goal of a good editor is not to reject you. If the editor has decided that the paper is being reviewed, that he really wants this paper to be published. So if you somehow defend yourself, point out reviewers' discrepancies, or defend your work in any other way, by, for example, arguing, or of course using this very refined and very nuanced arguments, right? Or just introducing some references. If you are defending your work, I think it's a good way to approach responding to comments. So clearly indicate the changes. The main changes is about being as precise as possible. So a good way to approach this is to basically pinpoint which reviewer you are referring to. I will not maybe read these parts of some responses, just give you some basic idea. So indicate which reviewer you are responding to, and of course, maybe copy-paste the exact comment and then just answer or comment or just basically respond. You can generalize minor revisions. I have mentioned this before. And I mean here some minor revisions like this for example, language issues. So, for example, comment 7 made by reviewer 1, the language has been corrected so as not to seem one-sided and to avoid making implicit assumptions about the right state of affairs. So it's basically for all these revisions that are too hard to pinpoint exactly in the paper, right? You would have to just, point to all the pages and all the lines that you have corrected the language. This would be pointless. Defending yourself is always a good idea. For example, one of the examples I have here is responding to some reviewer 1, and this reviewer stated that conclusion of a paper of the article is not new or surprising, and this is really harsh because usually this is about good quality research, that something is new, surprising, innovative. Well, despite this remark, the editor decided to publish this paper because the authors defended themselves. They stated these 2 points are rather difficult to address, given their vagueness and no references to any published sources, not new. We are not aware of any previous demonstrations of similar research. So a mistake made by a reviewer was that if something is not new or surprising, the reviewer should point out the literature describing this phenomena, this research, and so on. Another example of defending oneself, this is actually one of my letters, one of my responses. Dear editor, I am sending the revised article. Please note that the review is generally very positive. We have carefully considered and followed the referee's advice. However, one issue has been resolved in a way different than suggested. We do not consider splitting the results and presenting them only partially to be a reasonable solution. We explain the reasons for our decision in our responses to the referee's comments. If I remember correctly, this was really interesting case for me because, yeah, the reviews were really positive, but one of the reviewers, yeah, he suggested that we should generally just split the paper to half and made some more research, made some more interviews, surveys, and so on, and write the second part anew. So, but this was not, the problem is that this was not possible anymore because the project was just closed and we did not have any access to the respondents, to the interviewees, and so on. So basically, it was not possible. So we decided we must do everything to defend ourselves and to argue with this. And fortunately for us, it was a success. The editor approved. Of course, responding to comments is being extremely precise, and not only when it comes to writing these responses, but also, and a good editor will also, I think, emphasize this, that you should be as clear as possible, as precise as possible when highlighting or just marking your revisions. So you can use the track mode, track changes mode. You can use some highlighting. You can use some comments, but remember about anonymizing the comments. So please be informative, because the reviewers, which are to decide the fate of the paper, there is nothing more irritating than just receiving a paper without the revisions being highlighted, because of course, or marked, because you have to read the paper again and you just forgot what was there before, and you know what I mean. So my final maybe remarks, I am just I'm concluding now. My final remarks relate to AI, generative AI. I've decided to include this in this workshop to ask this question, because of course the AI is like a hype at the moment. So can generative AI help you? especially if you are not a native English speaker, but because I will be discussing language issues as well. Sure, I think it can help you because, of course, lots of research are being done at the moment that the not native English speakers are somehow, well, they have a harder life when they decide to publish in top-tier English language journals. Some research shows that when it comes to paper revisions, the frequency of language-related revision is 12.5 higher. When it comes to writing, the non-English speakers need 51% more time to write a paper. And when it comes to paper rejections, the frequency of language-related rejections is 2.5 times higher. And of course, AI can help you. I think AI can help you. It can augment your academic writing. So it can, for example, you can work with the language. But of course, AI will never, or at least not at the moment, when we are talking about what is the current state of AI. AI cannot replace original research ideas, or AI will not write a good paper for you, like, write the whole paper. So you can use AI to generate some ideas, to polish the language, to somehow summarize, to trim some parts of your papers, maybe just give you some ideas. You can use some prompts, right, to generate some ideas. So you can use various types of tools. And I'm also conducting workshop on these tools. I would suggest many. These are only some. Grammarly for language, PaperPal for language, and some maybe trimming and generating ideas. SciSpace for summarizing papers and also language issues. Quillbot for language issues. Elicit for summarizing papers. But I would recommend using specialized academic tools and not general AI tools like, for example, ChatGPT or BART, Google BART, or some other, because these are not academic, these hallucinate, these are wrong, more general. I think it's better to use these specialized tools. But whenever you use AI, especially for some ID generation and just generating some text, some part of text, I think it's extremely important to be as transparent as possible, because if the reviewers or the editors will detect AI usage, and there are lots of course, detectors. You can just put a piece of an article and just use different tools to try to detect whether it was AI generated or not. And it's almost, well, you may have come to a conclusion that it's an AI. Basically, you can see, sometimes you can see it's an AI. So it's not, it's basically, it's rejected, a straightaway rejection. So if you have used some AI, I think it's extremely important to be transparent and to declare this. So for example, you can declare this in a final moment, final paragraph, final part of the paper, some kind of declaration that you acknowledge the use of AI tools. And you can link to the tool to generate some part, what part, which prompt you have used, and how did you dealt with the output. Yeah, how did you use output? How did you modify the output? So I think this acknowledging AI use, if you use AI in any way, is extremely important, and this can only help you impress the editor, because it's being transparent. So thank you very much for this workshop. It was a pleasure. And from what I understand, there is a short Q&A session just now. But if you have any questions, you want to reach me out, please, by all means, please do. You can use my email. It's very easy, Piotr, and you can see the university domain. You can search me on social media. I'm present on X, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. You can, of course, visit my website. Thank you very much for this workshop.